Welcome back to another edition of Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Chris Bedford, senior editor at the Federalist, here with Rachel Bovard, a one-woman army against the tech monopolies that we are fighting, which is, an important thing to be because there's not a lot of troops yet. You're going to have to really pull this whole thing together.
We really are. We're a ragtag band of about 7.
There was a moment that we've been seeing in these last 2 weeks. So we're just wrapping up inauguration week right now. But the most important thing that seems to have happened is not that Joe Biden was inaugurated. It was the corpse bride. But that we have the complete overstatement and a whole new phase in the campaign from big tech against American freedoms, where it's gone beyond like kicking you off of Twitter or shadow banning you or making it so you get less likes on Facebook. And it's gone to, you can no longer do business in this economy. You can't swipe credit cards. You can't sell products. You can't take donations. And you can't even have a website that exists because you built it on Amazon. What is happening?
Yeah. So I think you're right that we have crossed a Rubicon into a space where if you do not think the right things and say the right things, you cannot participate in polite society. And it's this collusion of corporate power against wrongthink that is defined by one ideology.
And crossing the Rubicon would be so much more preferable because Caesar over Jeff Bezos, like any day, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. But I think Michael Lind put it really well in a piece he wrote in Tablet magazine not long after all of this happened when he said, we now have 2 constitutions in America. We have our political constitution and we have our corporate constitution. And the political constitution is working relatively well. You could argue it has flaws, but it's still functioning. But our corporate constitution,
it's on life support,
right? But our corporate constitution, arguably, is more powerful, right, than our political constitution. You now, as an individual citizen, you can be harassed, bullied, excommunicated. You can be impoverished by corporate private business, and the government can do that to you as well. But you have recourse. Under the political constitution, you have recourse against that government. You don't have recourse against the kind of corporate tyranny that we're seeing right now.
They're the corporate tyranny we have right now are the most powerful people
in the world.
Private people, and certainly in the world. I mean, we just saw them against an administration that was antagonistic toward them, shut down communications, shut down donations to the President of the United States. That's an unreal thing for them to have done. Forget about what they can actually do to other people. And our leaders in Washington, I know that they feel tough with they've got this whole kabuki theater, this panic porn that's surrounding our Capitol of 25,000 guardsmen who they're now making sleep in car garages.
Panic porn is so perfect.
It's insane what we're watching to make themselves feel safe, to protect themselves from Americans. And, behind their masks, even though they've all been inoculated, or all been immunized. I don't think they're the right people to actually put an end to this overreach from guys like Jeff Bezos and who are coming at this, Mark Zuckerberg, who less so, Jack, who are coming at this with not only a huge amount of power and vitality and money and control of information and little oversight, but a complete and total belief that what they're doing is right.
Yeah, so I think the Democrats and Republicans, I think, have 2 different approaches to this that I think are worth pointing out. Because the Democrats, by and large, are completely comfortable with what's happening.
They're cheering. They demanded it. Some of them said, we need this, you're in trouble.
They love it. And that to me is a terrifying development because you have sort of corporate power now merging with state power in very unaccountable and non-transparent ways. And what I mean by this is, right before Trump got universally banned from all the platforms, you saw Michelle Obama make a public plea about Trump's rhetoric. And she didn't make the plea to Congress. She didn't make it to Trump. She didn't make it to people, right? She went to big tech.
That's so terrifying.
And she said, shut him down. Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, did the same thing. And then we're now seeing this evolution where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her comms director, went on Twitter made a public appeal to Twitter because a tweet from her boss, from AOC, was circulating, made back during the BLM riots, where she said protests should make people uncomfortable. And obviously that was coming back to bite her. So her comms director
because the Democrats were very pro-riot just a few weeks ago.
Correct, yeah. So her comms director said, Twitter, take this down. They are memory holding all of this stuff. And you just saw it with the Washington Post today or yesterday.
Did Twitter take it down?
Twitter, I haven't actually checked if they did or not.
My gosh,
but
that'd be insane.
the Washington Post did this for Kamala Harris.
They're using my words to harass me.
Right. And Washington Post removed an unseemly anecdote about Kamala Harris's, prison crackdown in California. They just wiped it out of a story. And so we're seeing this sort of Democrats, our politics has now devolved into begging sort of the corporate means of communication to whitewash and memory hole anything you've ever done. So Democrats by and large are applauding this. But then you have the right, who has spent the last 30 years convincing themselves that a reflexive alliance with corporate power is a good thing, that they couldn't possibly be harmed by it, that private business is going to save us all. And there's some truth to that, generally speaking, but it's not working right now. And so you found a right, the Republican party in the right flank, basically unable to deal with this problem. And
they're compromised, hopelessly compromised.
They're compromised, and they literally they don't even know how to think about it, because they spent 30 years pretending like this could never happen and being told it could never happen. And you have the intellectual framework of the Republican Party here in DC actively saying all of this is fine.
Yeah, I'm not comparing either one of these players to either one of these players. But it kind of reminds me of the beginning of the German invasion of the USSR, where it took over a week to convince Stalin that they were invading. Because he was like, no way.
Yeah.
No way. They were friends. We had an agreement. They're private business. They're not. They didn't just shut down the president and all of his friends. And the New York Post
libertarian think tanks in D.C. are like, what happened to Parler is fine. It's Parler's fault.
It's a private company.
Yeah. They violated the rules.
But the Babylon Bee headline was just so perfect of showing a Terminator stomping on someone's head and the guy yelling, "It's okay, you're a private company."
Right, yeah. That's kind of where we are. The Republican Party cannot yet admit that corporate power can be as big a threat to individual liberty as government power. It does not compute for them, despite the fact that we are seeing it. We are literally witnessing it.
And we've seen, this is we're not on a slippery slope. We're at the part in Spartacus where they light the logs on fire and roll them down.
Right. We're tumbling down now. Yeah.
And this thing, it's starting off right now. Right now, it started. This whole new phase of the war is starting with Parler and Donald Trump's campaign, a presidential campaign, by the way. And Parler, a company which no evidence has yet been presented, is remotely responsible, or even has an outsized amount of impact on the organization of this riot. By the way, one riot. Not hundreds of riots. Mm-hmm. This is going to move beyond that, because every step so far has been moving beyond it. It started off with the crazies. It started off with the Holocaust deniers. It started off with Stormfront. Before I knew it, it was Alex Jones. And people were like, okay, whatever. A la Pundit, whoever. They came up to the Federalist for a brief time. They were moving bit after bit after bit and coming at people and saying, well, they deserve it. They deserve it. They deserve it. And then they started to go after normal people and go after people who were politicians and shut down congressional committees. So that's what's going to happen again this time. And when I see them saying you can't accept donations because you're a hate group, because you say that you support the president, that's at this point, 3 months to a year removed from your Knights of Columbus can't accept online donations because they have socially conservative Catholic views on marriage and life.
Yeah.
Or a gender. And then it goes on to the smaller church groups, the things that are even easier to hit than the Knights of Columbus. They don't have millions of dollars. And take out your bakery, take out your... It's going to be what we saw with the Colorado baker on a national scale. And the right needs its own internet at this point, because you're not going to be able to... Hobby Lobby would not be able to have an online store based on their politics the way this is going.
Yeah, and I think that's the scariest part about this. And you wrote about this recently when you were like, this is the guts of capitalism, right? The thing that makes our society roll forward, the ability to earn a living, the ability to participate in society. I'm not talking about being able to post on Facebook. I'm talking about being able to raise money and run a business, free from harassment, and being able to access a mainstream audience to be able to do that. That is under threat right now in America. And the right, and speaking as someone who is on the right, we have no answer to it. We have a bunch of policies that we're kind of talking about.
Because you've dug into this.
Yeah. Well, we haven't considered it a threat ever, right? The left has actually thought a lot more about this stuff than we have, parts of the progressive left than part of the right has. And, we've for 30 years ignored it as a problem. We thought this could never happen.
Last CPAC, 2 CPACs ago, was sponsored by Google.
Right. Well, I think Google might still be a sponsor, but I'm not sure.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, that's lovely.
But, and because we also have an aversion to antitrust enforcement, And that is sort of an ideology that's baked into the Republican Party. We have an aversion to what we call regulation, even when some sort of regulatory framework is necessary for a free market to function.
The Republican Party, though, has like a rich tradition, maybe not the conservative movement, but of antitrust.
They have a rich historical
And some
tradition,
conservatives
right?
do as well, like Taft.
Yeah. No, it's only been in the last 30 years. It's sort of the Bork era of antitrust enforcement. But I would even argue, as someone who has now studied Bork, because we're in an antitrust environment, Bork himself, everyone says, well, it just has to be about prices. No, Bork's definition of what constituted harm was actually all pretty broad. It was prices, but it was also innovation. It was consumer choice. It was sort of freedom in the marketplace. All the things we don't have now, Bork was very aware of. But we've had this ideological movement on the right that has just narrowed and narrowed and narrowed the focus of antitrust enforcement so much that we are now at the stage where our legal system could give antitrust immunity to the biggest companies in the world.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
I remember being, this has been a movement, as far as I'm concerned, ideologically for myself. I mean, I've said this before, probably talking to you, but I cannot believe I'm on the same side as Elon Musk and Glenn Greenwald.
It's very disconcerting.
At the end of Donald Trump. If someone said to me in 2012, when Donald Trump is leaving office, you and Glenn Greenwald and Elon Musk will all be in agreement. It's like, what Disney World are you talking about?
We're living in the upside down.
So there are some people who are catching on to this. There's a group that just got founded, which we talked about last weekend, Right Forge, which is trying to. There are ways to actually build alternative internets, to build new hosting services. This is just in its infancy, but there's a sudden market for places where there is still freedom on the internet. It seemed like be done, but it's certainly an uphill battle. Do you have any faith in that, or do you think that this is just reinventing the wheel?
I'm skeptical. I want it to succeed, and I think it has to succeed if the right and right-thinking people and free-praying people have any hope of survival. But we're going to have to do it so quickly, because this is something we should have been building over time to the point that we could scale it instantly, right, when something like this happens. But we're going to have to access scale so fast. And I worry. And I also think I worry about the long-term impact as a country of us creating the build your own ethos, right? So it was like, build your own Twitter if you don't like it. Okay, well then build your own platform.
It's literally the American dream.
Yeah,
if you don't like something, you can do it yourself, and you can make money doing it if you're good at it.
But it's turning into, first
just
of all,
kidding.
Parler got completely shut down anyway.
Just kidding.
So yeah. But you start a platform, and then you're like, okay, well build your own internet. Okay, well build your own cloud hosting service. Okay, build your own bank. Build your own country. Right, and we are at risk, I think, of creating a situation where we're groups of people, but living in one country, but living two separate lives.
I think that's true, but I don't think that's because of anything the right's doing. If it's kind of like the left said, every one of you is exiled from the city. You have to stay outside the walls. And then we built a roof for ourselves, and they looked down and said, "Why are you trying to create a separate society?" It's like, because they kicked me outside of the walls. It's freaking cold out here.
But that's the thing, though, and the Parler example I think is very instructive of this. Is fine, go build your own. They will not let you exist, right? They will come for you.
And that's the next level. And this is not, people get this confused. Probably none of our listeners, but I did at first. This is not Amazon shutting down Parler where you can't buy it on Amazon anymore. This is Amazon shutting down Parler, Amazon web hosting services. That means you have nowhere to put your website online. And the problem they couldn't just move it to another service is because they built it using Amazon's tools. Now, that could be completely incorrect, but that's what I've gleaned.
No, that's right. But it was the web hosting service that denied them the web component, but then also the App Store, Apple's App Store, and
which is the only way to get any app on Apple,
yep.
unless you unlock your phone, which causes a lot of security problems for you.
And Google Play kicked it out of its App Store. And everyone will tell you, if you're building any kind of sort of web service or app, you have to be in the App Store or you cannot survive. And there's people that say, oh, well, they could find this Russian cloud hosting service, which I think Parler might be on right now. And, there's a backdoor way of importing it onto your Android Google phone. But that's not the point. The point
I can't figure that out.
But the point is, if you are cut off, it's not just mere existence, right? That proves the point. If you want to be able to actually build your own, you have to be able to access a mainstream audience. You have to access the guts of capitalism. You have to be able to do that. And I think it's such intellectual bankruptcy and hypocrisy from people on the right who didn't defend Parler as soon as this happened. right? Who didn't come out swinging.
There were some
"This
people
is
on the right
inappropriate."
at the Cato Institute, which, by the way, if you give money to the Cato Institute, stop. I know they send you a pocket constitution and a picture of Jefferson, but they hate Jefferson and they hate you. It's a public service announcement.
Well, but like these, if you are going to lecture conservatives who are unhappy with the big tech platforms to build your own, and then they do, and then this happens, there's a collusive effort to deny them the marketplace they need to survive.
Their tech scholar cheered when the Federalist was when Google tried to defund the Federalist. He cheered for that because they're a private company.
My problem with this argument is that it's technically true, right? Like in the sense that if you're looking,
not if you're a monopoly, not
right,
if you own the
this is my
railroads,
point, right? Yeah, if you're looking very, very narrowly through like an eye slit, then you can make this case. But the argument is much broader, right? It's in the context of monopoly power.
Now, if they were intellectually honest, they would know that because the reason they said it wasn't a monopoly power is because if you don't like it, you can build your own.
Right, now you can't.
No, you can't. So that's over now. Okay, so like, can we move on? And
this is actually convenient that we don't have to deal with this retort anymore. It's been proven false.
Just read up on Friedrich Hayek and say, wow, you're right. Monopolies should be the whipping boy of the U.S. economy. Just like you shouldn't get rich running Amtrak because you have a monopoly. You should no longer get rich running Amazon. I mean, that's just insane what they're doing here and the way they're benefiting. And you know what they're running cover for, which I know that is not quite your area of expertise, but you've seen it because you've been doing this for a while. Tech is providing a lot of cover for the banks, which are doing this on exactly as much. The insurance companies, which are going after people, the banks which are denying people bank accounts, the banks that will say we're not lending money or holding money for a completely legal gun manufacturer in New York that provides jobs to local citizens. I mean, that's also a threat to the freedom, and that's another problem that the right needs around banks.
Yeah, I know. Build your own bank. No, this started under Trump. It was gun manufacturers, and then it was any business that contracted with ICE. Banks would no longer do business with them. I think it was Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and Citigroup are now not giving any political donations to Republicans, which is
Republicans
different.
are so bad at boycotting. Like, I've been meaning to remove my account from Bank of America for like 2 years.
Yeah.
I just don't.
We're really bad at it. And also,
the left would have done it. They would have spent all day just investing from that place.
When you're so dominant as a company, like, you can actually survive a pretty significant boycott, and it doesn't bother you.
And that's what we've been discovering over the last few weeks is how difficult it is to unplug from tech. I mean, it's not difficult. Just like remember your training. I mean, I'm older, but part of that generation that remembers the first home computer. Mm-hmm. Kids don't remember that. They probably have an iPod above their crib when they come out. Like, it's insane. There was one interesting aspect to this that's proven to be good in a way, because at one level, a lot of the problem with this was, and the conservatives bought onto it, was the libertarian dominance of regulatory thinking that we've had for 30, 40 years, maybe longer. And that's why part of the reason why we were unprepared, and there was a friendliness toward business and tech and innovation, as there ought to be. But the funny thing is now, a lot of the saviors on the right and the people who have the skills and the know-how and the drive to build the systems to actually get around this are those same libertarians. I've been talking to them now, and these are guys who I maybe disagreed with in 2010. I think we're all pretty much in agreement. They're the Ron Paul guys. They're the money bomb guys. They're the guys who were building the websites, building the infrastructure of the libertarians, pushed back the pot smokers and the guys with the mohawks. That everyone in the CPAC was like, what are you doing? And now but they know how to code, and they know how to build web services. And they might be the path out of this if there is one. There's a lot of, most people in Silicon Valley, except for Peter Thiel, who are on the right, are not conservatives.
No, they're not.
They're libertarians.
Yeah.
And they might be the path forward if they can disconnect from Cato.
So, I mean, I think you may be right, but, in this sense, we were talking to some tech folks recently, and they all feel this way, right? They're not conservatives by any means, but they're libertarian, and they're investing and inventing, I think, some of these alternative tech. But again, it goes back to this issue of scale. We actually have to build our own internet infrastructure on the right. And it can't just be these sort of one-off things that take 10 years because we don't have 10 years.
No.
And that's the thing that scares me.
Well, some of the companies I've been talking to, like RightForge, within a week they already had clients that they were speaking with. They had the ability to host. The money is already beginning to pour in. there's such a market right now. If anyone out there is listening who has been sitting there getting yelled at, like, why aren't you making more money? There's an opportunity here. And as the left would say, learn to code. I mean, there are some people out there who are moving quickly, and there was no market for it just last Thursday. You didn't if you started a conservative wrench company, you might have sold some wrenches, advertising at the Caller or Breitbart or Federalist, but no, you don't need a conservative wrench because conservatives can buy wrenches. Now, if they said you can't, you could actually sell that, make it red, white, and blue. And that's what's going on with the internet, it seems like.
Although it does kind of go back to your analogy about pushing us outside the city and then being like, why are you doing that? Even if we build our own infrastructure, with the woke ideology that we export from these universities really does believe that we don't even have a right to our own infrastructure.
Oh yeah, we need to use the outside the city encampment to build an army to take the city.
Yeah, because we can build everything we want, but if they're going to come for us with resources like we already see them doing, that poses a whole other existential threat that we aren't prepared for.
And that's what, and I know that we're short on time for you, and we're sorry to have a shorter podcast because I know that you're on the road, and thanks for taking time. Mm-hmm. But that brings me to the sad conclusion of the op-ed that I put out at the Federalist on Friday, which is I think might be the spark that's lighted the fire. This is not going to be the Civil War. This is not going to be people lining up. Greg Abbott and DeSantis are not seceding. There's nothing like that. And I don't think there's going to be violence at a higher level than we've already seen for a bit. But we are at the 30 Years' War aspect of Europe where there are so many different small things. Everyone's waiting. They know that this is a tinderbox. They know that America is more on edge than ever. And every time that we take a big hit, we get weaker and weaker. Every time they tear down statues, we get through it, but we get weaker. And this might be the thing that we look back on in a year and say, oh, that's the thing. And I'm not talking 30 Years' War where monks are hanging from trees all out on the highway. I'm talking 30 Years' War and the massive fragmentation of Europe and the Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire, and the people. And just in 30 years' time, it was an unrecognizable place when it had been.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Our consensus has been slowly degrading, and now the infrastructure, the mechanisms by which we live together are now reflecting that broken consensus.
The 1776 project was canceled.
Yeah.
That was to teach you about the founding.
Yeah. And you cannot live together under these circumstances. So where do we go from here is a very timely and legitimate question.
The answer is Florida. Well, thank you for joining us today, Rachel. This has been wonderful. You can find Rachel Bovard's work. Where can they find you on social media where she is fire?
Yeah, follow me now before I get banned at Rachel Bovard, Bovard.
Are you on Telegram?
I am on Telegram, on Signal. I'm on all the encrypted places too.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. And until next time, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.